Hey everyone, this is Steven.
And this is Megan. And this is the Synchrony podcast, where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church.
One of these days you're going to be able to say that without having a really hard thinking face.
Oh, I have to think really hard. I'm like, okay, we've done this 7 times
Yeah.
now. I have to make sure it's the same. And you'd think there's a solution to this, right? Which is that I write it down,
Yeah.
but I haven't done that yet. So that's probably a to-do list item for us.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about podcasting tonight, babe?
Oh, feel great.
Yeah,
I feel like it's getting a little bit more natural.
Yeah, today's been a good day too. We had a nice mix of getting things done and hanging out with the kids and not hanging out with the kids, and it's a nice way to cap off the day.
Yeah, it has been nice. Mm-hmm. What are we going to talk about, babe?
We're going to talk about matchmaking and why we thought that matchmaking made sense for our community as the answer to the question of how apostolics date better. So why matchmaking works, or why we think it works, and sort of the basis behind it. It's going to be really fun. Now we can talk about housekeeping stuff.
Guess what?
What?
It's 1 week left until launch.
That's pretty crazy because I remember when we started making this plan for launching and how we were going to do it, you were like, oh, April is so far away.
Oh, it's still too far away.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. It's going to be really cool. And I'm excited because the people that have been coming into the process in the pre-launch phase are really energized about it. And are like, I've had some consultations with them and they're excited, which makes us excited. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So what that means, if you're listening for the first time, on April 1st, we are launching our new and improved suite of services, our matchmaking process, access to our closed Synchrony community, which only has people in it that have gone through the process of doing a consultation with us, and so are kind of vetted. All of that is going to be available starting on April 1st. And we've already had people who are pre-registering who have been able to get in there early. So if you're interested, now is the time to pre-register, not just because you can get in early, but also because why?
Save $100.
Because you'll save $100 on our matchmaking services. What that consultation fee is for is like a handful of hours of work just in the setup of getting everything ready and talking to someone and diving deep into their history. And that also kind of includes the first month of their matching process as well. So I think it's worth it, but this discount is also pretty good and probably the most we'll ever discount it. So if you haven't sent it to your single friends who you think would benefit, do that because they only have a few days left. If you have a sister-in-law or brother-in-law that you have been thinking about while listening to this, or a cousin
or a child
or a child, subtly and gently find a way to bring this to their attention and let them know that this is the time that they should go in and pre-register so that they can save that money. If you're a pastor's wife, just sidle on up to your singles at church.
Yeah.
Easter Sunday, man, is sort of like last chance.
Yeah.
So
let your singles coordinators, pastors, ministers know about this.
Absolutely. The other thing we should talk about is just a reminder to everyone that we do have an email where you can send questions. We're hoping to have some that we can answer on the podcast. We have gotten at least one question submitted, which is great, and we're planning how we're going to respond to that. It's going to be a really good one.
We might even have a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, gosh, I hope so. So
I hope we can afford to pay him.
We almost definitely cannot. Anyway, but we're looking forward to that. So if you want to ask a question or, just make a comment about what you're hearing and kind of join the conversation, you can send it to questions@synchronyproject.com and we'll check it and with your permission, include it in the podcast.
Sounds like a plan.
Anything else that we need to tell people before we dive in?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, babe.
Yes.
Just to kind of recap, This is our 7th podcast now. So we've already covered a lot of ground, I think, in terms of laying out the foundation of what we're doing and how the project works and why we think it's important.
We made it further than I thought we would.
Don't tell them that. Yeah, go us.
Woo.
Fist bump. Okay.
Fist bump.
So anyway, we've talked a little bit about the loneliness sort of wound in our churches. And we've talked about why there might not be a great space for apostolics to date. We talked a little bit about the origins of our current dating culture and how they don't really map to scripture. And all of this combined is part of the ecosystem of why dating is so hard for our singles. There are other factors, that we'll be able to touch on, but we've talked about a lot of the big ones that are kind of blocking people from making good connections, right?
Yep.
So I want to talk about matchmaking and why we think that it's the right tool to solve that gap, right? Like why we think that this is the right thing to close the gap instead of just like another dating site or a different kind of social structure to our singles groups or something like that. But before we do that, I want you to look at something with me.
Okay.
So we're going to open up our Instagram story, Instagram, and go look at. I put up a question earlier asking
stories.
people, asking people about basically the question is, what was your first reaction when you heard about apostolic matchmaking?
Do we have some respondents?
Yeah. So I asked this question in our Instagram story, which was, what was your first reaction when you heard about apostolic matchmaking?
I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, we got some really good responses. So I'm just going to try to read through these quickly.
Sounds good.
Okay. And I'm not going to say names because I don't know if people want me to share who was responding to it. So we'll just keep these anonymous. Someone goes, finally, and interesting, with a like stroke chin smiley face.
Oh, yeah.
Someone goes, first thought, how fun. I want in, with a cry laughing face. And then it's so hard out here. Someone says, honestly, like another dating app, but I was intrigued because apostolic is in the phrase, which is nice because a lot of dating apps, you're having to go drill down to that one little tiny this is me now commentating. You have to drill down to that one little tiny category of like Pentecostal and then, cross your fingers. Someone says, I had some skepticism about it, which I can respect. Someone says, would this be worth it? Honestly, my first thought, and that's
fair.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Someone said, I was intrigued. It was shared on Insta by a trusted friend, so I was willing to consider. I feel like that's how we get a lot of people involved, is word of mouth.
Yeah.
So thank you to that trusted friend. This one's great. This person goes, thank God, in all caps, someone to do the searching for me. Someone says, to be honest, a little skeptical because of all the drama reality shows, but then I heard who was doing it. Yeah, so there's like 3, probably more, big matchmaking based shows right now, like on Netflix. So I think that's probably what they're referring to, but it's really funny. Someone says in all caps, finally, and the fact that it was y'all doing this, ... hallelujah, in all caps. This person knows us. Yeah. So that helps. Another person says, finally, I seriously am so excited. I felt immediately encouraged. Someone says, about time, with a cry laughing face. This one is my favorite one. My girl's like, this could work if these people aren't weirdos. And then in parentheses, luckily you guys are great. And I'm just going to tell this person, who I hope is listening, we're a little bit weirdos. Like,
no.
Yeah, just the kind of
weird. Yes. Weirdos. No.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you're asking. And then
I'm a beekeeper, for goodness sake.
Right, that's so normal. And then the last one on here was, I was hesitant, but I knew it worked for other conservative cultures, which is something we're also going to talk about.
That's true.
What do you think of those responses?
Oh, I loved them. I love that there's both sides of the coin. There's the ones that are like, y'all are crazy, but also thanks.
Yeah, I love that people were willing to say like, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, but then there's also the people that were like, I've been looking forward to something like this. Thank you for providing the opportunity. I like seeing both sides.
Yeah. So it was cool for me to see. And some of the folks that were answering have been involved in the project for a while. They've done consultations. I've gotten to meet them, and talk to them, quote unquote, face to face. So,
and I would like to point out that probably over 2/3 of those responses, we did not know these people prior to this project.
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah, it was there wasn't like just a bunch of close friends that happened to be single who are trying to hype us up.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, guys. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to start off with, just to kind of say, like, when people hear about matchmaking, I think people have a reaction to it, right? And maybe you're in the camp of like, oh, how cool, how interesting. Or maybe you're in the camp of like, this sounds like something crazy out of an 18th century novel, right? But anyway, so that I wanted to start off with people's first impressions.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the meat of the podcast.
Yeah.
Why is matchmaking the right way to solve this problem?
So the problem being basically like how hard it is for people, right? How hard it is for apostolic singles to find matches.
Yeah.
I want to be really clear. Matchmaking is not the only way for this to happen. So we're not under the impression that, we should, as a church, instate matchmaking as the correct way for everyone to go about dating.
Absolutely not.
Honestly, guys, we don't have the time for all that.
No.
But I think it's an option, and an important option, because there are things about apostolic dating that are unique.
Yeah.
And matchmaking provides some unique benefits.
Yeah.
To some of those things.
Well, unique is one way of putting it, but sometimes it's also just blatantly complex.
Complexity is another great way to frame it.
You have single dating, and that in and of itself is already a difficult task. Mm-hmm. Single dating, middle age, in the middle of your career, maybe you may or may not have kids. Mm-hmm. You may or may not have a job you can't leave.
Right. There's
then
so many
on top of it, you may or may not have a disability.
Sure.
Or let's just throw this in the mix. You want to marry someone from the same denomination.
I got confused because denomination isn't what we're... Denomination, like Apostolic Pentecostal, is the denomination.
Yeah, I know.
You're talking about organization?
I was saying denomination.
Oh.
Because in the general world, mm-hmm. all of that by itself is difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Then you add in the denomination as a factor, which just completely makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're getting at is that one of the reasons why matchmaking is a good fit for us is what I'm calling the base criteria for eligibility for someone to be a potential dating partner for an apostolic single is very, very high, right?
Yeah.
So by that, I mean, we can't, if we're dating, with our values, if we're dating according to scripture, we can't date someone just because they say they're Pentecostal. We can't date someone just because of the factors that maybe worldly dating would be fine with, right?
Yeah.
Which is just looks, just income, just location.
And values.
And interests, right?
Yeah.
Our basic criteria for who is eligible is higher than that. It's not just that they're Pentecostal, that they say they're Pentecostal, and that they go to a Pentecostal church. Are they serving God?
Yeah.
And are they serving God in the way that matches mine? Because two Pentecostal churches could have slightly different views on that, right? Yeah. I've spoken to people who say, listen, I go to a church that subscribes to X, Y, and Z type of holiness standard.
Yeah.
And while I'm happy to date from any other church, they're going to have to understand that marrying me involves, submitting to this level of standard, mm-hmm. right? So there's a complexity there just to say, like, who's eligible is harder to define for us than it is for the average population.
Yeah. What's funny is I've gotten questions from people like, oh, this is really cool. Why don't you expand it to everyone?
Right.
Or to other Christian denominations? Mm-hmm. And I go, listen, there's already enough complexities to deal with just matching people in the apostolic faith, much less trying to also add other Christian denominations or even just opening it to the general public. Like that, we would get so overwhelmed so fast. So like we wanted to make this a, for lack of better words, service to apostolics, because that's what we're passionate about.
Right. I mean, beyond that too, like I don't have the expertise. I can speak to the needs of our people.
Yeah.
And I only say that because I spent, multiple years in deep study of our culture and then have done all this deep research with this group of people.
Exactly.
This is where our heart is, I think, and where our focus should always be. But anyway, so the base criteria is really high. I think another factor that makes matchmaking a really good tool for us is that we have a distributed population, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some states where, like Florida, has a fairly dense population of apostolic churches.
Yeah.
In the big scheme of things.
In a lot of the bigger cities, at least.
Yeah. So you're usually within a couple hours drive at least of another church, truth preaching church. Not always a big church, but there are other districts where that is not the case at all. I mentioned my friend who lived in Montana and the 6-hour drive between her church and the nearest church that they could fellowship with.
Yeah.
So that's just a reality. Sometimes you're in a district where all the churches near you happen to be very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of diversity in the types of churches that we have within our fellowships. And I'm only, really well-versed in what the UPCI has, but I think the same goes for ALJC churches, WPF churches, other churches that have similar structures, right?
Yeah.
So that means that location by itself is not enough to determine eligibility.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to work for everyone to find someone in their local congregation or even in the congregation that's in closest proximity to them.
Yeah. I mean, it would be my assumption that you have already searched the market in your immediate area, if you want to speak, if you want to call it that.
It's not that we're comparing spouses to home goods, but I get it.
No, but I mean, it's not the same concept, but similar parallels.
Yeah.
You've the fish in your little pond are not fish that you necessarily would like to spend the rest of your life with. So searching outside your parameters would be of best interest for you. Right. And so that's where this service comes into play.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think the third factor, which relates to both of those, is that there isn't, as we've talked about before, a set process or space that is specifically for apostolic dating.
Yeah.
So, as an example, like most of our churches share an understanding of what tithe payment looks like.
Yep.
And we might have slightly different tools for how we collect tithing and how we, all the sort of mechanics of how it's handled might be slightly different from church to church, but we share an understanding of what healthy tithe paying looks like within our organizations. I don't know that we have that for dating.
No, I don't think so.
I think we have a pretty good understanding of what really unhealthy dating might look like.
Yeah.
But we don't have the same set of tools. Or I guess another one would be like, another sort of cultural icon would be like music, right?
Yeah.
You can hear different songs played in different churches, but you're going to hear a lot of repeats, and there's a sort of a common understanding of what's in, what sounds are really popular, which artists are popular at any given time, and it changes like every 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
We don't have that for dating, where we understand as a community what the process should be like, and we haven't created a shared space for that everyone knows the rules around, right? Which makes the existing online spaces like our singles networks and our Facebook groups really difficult to navigate, because not everyone in there has an understanding of how they operate. And, there's a mix of folks in there, some of whom are digital natives, some of whom are not, which means there's almost a language barrier sometimes.
For real.
Yeah. In terms of knowing what is normal or appropriate or, good to have in that kind of online setting. So our base criteria is high, our population is distributed, and there's not a set process that we all agree on for what healthy dating looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the main factors that make matchmaking a good intermediary to come in and say, like, hey, you and I as matchmakers can help diminish some of the complexity here.
Yep.
And kind of like cut through the noise of, different approaches and different spaces and all that kind of stuff, and kind of put people on a level playing field.
Yeah. What's funny is we were just shopping for sound equipment to help us with further podcasting, and
right.
I had to download Honey because I wanted to see if I can save some money. No pun intended.
Honey is
a beekeeper.
Honey is a browser plugin that can give you coupons.
Yep. So
this is not a sponsored. This is not a sponsored podcast. We just like it.
Yet.
Okay. Speak it in faith.
That's right. And what's funny is Honey is always there if you download it. Mm-hmm. And when you're shopping, you're still shopping for the stuff that you were going to buy anyways. Mm-hmm. But when you go to check out, it searches for coupons that you never expected to find. Mm-hmm. And so what's cool is there was an opportunity for me to save money based on that application. So what's funny is I was just thinking about this in comparison to Synchrony, because when you're single, you're not going to stop looking for someone if you're using our services.
Yeah, absolutely not.
But we could also be searching for you.
Right.
And there might be an opportunity for you to meet someone in a state or a country that you never expected to meet or never would have ever interacted with in your average work year.
Right.
And if it works out, if you really like that person, if you really click, awesome.
Yeah.
And we just hope to give you tools to help that process be easier for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good sort of way to frame it, as like, it's something to enhance your search.
Yeah, right? It's not replacing it.
It doesn't replace the search, but it enhances it and hopefully makes it less stressful and less confusing.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's anyone who has, maybe our respondents would have to weigh in. I don't know that there's anyone that has completely offloaded their search to us, right?
I would love to hear if they did, though.
No, but I mean, I kind of don't want them to, right? Like I want people to keep their eyes open. I'm actually even more excited about the people who have come to us since they started working with us saying, hey, I learned a lot about my values from talking to you and from going through the process of doing my consultation. And I started dating someone that I had never given a chance to, and I'm in a really great relationship.
Yeah.
Like that's happened a couple of times. And that's honestly really cool to me.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Well, what's funny is, and we're not going to say names, but I love the example that's happening most recently where there was a couple that had met on a Facebook.
Oh, yes.
Facebook singles group.
Yep. Love you guys.
They gave each other a chance and they just decided not to go further with it.
From what I understand from talking to them, like, they had lightly talked and conversed, but they hadn't taken it any step further because they weren't sure. I guess their conversation hadn't let them know enough about their fit for each other. So they kind of just had left it on the back burner and it had kind of tapered off.
Yeah.
So when I met with each of them individually and I was about to match them.
Yeah, which is the funny part.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And come to find out, they were already talking. And a few weeks later, the lady of this pair messaged me and said, hey, we were talking about something else. And I asked her about this because the guy had mentioned that he was talking to her. And I said, hey, little birdie told me that you guys were already chatting. And she was like, yeah, I don't know really what happened after we both had consultations, but we reconnected and clicked and we're getting ready to meet in person.
Yeah.
And then she sent me, oh gosh, like I was like screaming looking at this. She sent me a picture of the two of them together doing something that they both love and smiling and just looking. I'm going to start crying. It's going to happen. Just looking so happy and beautiful and radiant. And she said, I just wanted to let you know we met. It's been amazing. We're going to start exclusively dating. Ugh, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm going to
Let it
get
out,
it.
baby.
I'm going to get it together. It was so cute and they look so happy and these people just deserve all the good things. So we got off on a tangent. All that to say is we want to help in your search, even if helping doesn't look like you meeting someone in one of our matched conversations.
Yep.
Like that's okay too.
What's funny is I've been seeing some comments, or not really comments, but more of like direct messages or some people I've talked to in person that have said the phrase of like, didn't people used to do that a long time ago?
Yeah.
Or like, isn't that like kind of outdated? And I mean, to be fair, I mean, it hasn't been used in our movement that we know of. And so it is a foreign concept.
Right. And I mean, it's worth saying our movement, the Apostolic Church as it exists in, since the dawn of the 20th century, is much younger than matchmaking.
Yeah.
Like, matchmaking has existed for a very, very long time. We're talking about using some kind of professionalized person to bring two people together. So not just getting a referral from a friend, but someone in a culture or community that wears that hat of learning how to do this well, developing it as a skill, kind of becoming the go-to person in the community to help make marriages happen. That's existed across a lot of different cultures for a very long time. But it's kind of having a cultural moment now. So we mentioned before about like the shows that are big right now. I know a couple of them are on Netflix, and I'm not recommending necessarily that everyone run out and watch these because I don't know what is in them necessarily. So, don't all go run and see.
We are not endorsing it.
Yeah, that's a better way to say that. I know that there's one about Indian matchmaking. Arranged marriages in traditional Indian families have been around for a very long time. Again, largely due to the complexity of their social structure and religious structure, right? India is an incredibly diverse nation, ethnically and religiously, and they also had a very, for Hindus in that society, there was for many, many generations, and to some extent still today, a very strict caste system that would determine what kind of people could marry each other. And so all of that complexity and, the desire for families to improve the situation of their children led to a very well-developed professional matchmaking sort of space.
Yeah.
Similar things for observant or Orthodox Jews. So, and if you think about the community of Jews that have, for generations were sort of in diaspora all across the world, they had to develop a professionalized kind of process for finding people who were really Jewish. And, you'll have to remember that for many years in many places around the world, people weren't allowed to openly practice Judaism.
Yeah.
Right. Or they were persecuted for that. So you would need a role that was a professional at knowing which families were Jewish and were actually observant. And now in modern times, just like with Christianity, there's so many different groups and sects within Judaism and different sort of schools of thought. And those mean different practices and different perspectives on what it means to practice Judaism well. And so they need someone in an intermediary type role that can go identify the people who practice in the same way. So these are other groups kind of like ours that have that high base eligibility criteria, right? And I think it makes sense for matchmaking to have kind of come to be in those cultures because, especially for people who, if you think about like Indian families in the UK and the United States, right, who are from, recently or currently sort of immigrants to a new culture that doesn't map to the culture that they were in before, it would be even more important to find someone who could help them identify people of like values.
Yep.
And if you think about the church as that kind of being strangers in a world and in a culture where we don't necessarily belong, right? We've chosen to follow a different way of life, even within kind of worldly culture. Our standards just have to be very high.
Yeah.
For what makes someone a good potential spouse for us. So I think it is something old, and that has a lot of history. And I don't pretend to know all of the history around matchmaking.
Oh, sure.
Or how it shows up in every different culture. But suffice to say, it's been around for a very long time. And, I think the fact that it's coming back, quote unquote, coming back or making sort of a cultural appearance is because people in other cultures and in our modern society are just as hungry for an answer to how hard it is to date. Because it's not just hard for apostolics.
No, of course not. Even last night, I was talking to my friend Maria, and who is not apostolic, and she was saying that this is something that is experienced from her perspective too.
Yeah, I don't think that the challenges of our dating culture are unique. I think the criteria are,
Yeah.
right, for what makes a person a good spouse. But I think everyone's experiencing just modern dating and how difficult and painful it is.
Yeah.
I don't think loneliness is unique to us
Absolutely
either.
not.
But yeah, so people are hungry for a solution. The difference is I think it actually works in our culture.
Yeah.
Because we have, sort of structures and processes that give us it's not hard for me as a matchmaker to be able to verify that someone believes the right things or that they're engaged in the right activities to make them to meet those baseline criteria for another apostolic person.
Yep.
Right. So I think that's, one of the reasons why, even though it is kind of an old practice, like it's fitting well in the moment that we're in right now.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Is matchmaking biblical?
You mean like, does scripture allow for something like matchmaking? Like, is it okay or does it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. We're going to have more conversations about like how this approach fits with like theology.
Yeah.
And we're probably not that equipped to speak to all the the ins and outs of that, but we'll get other people who are involved.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint. So, but in terms of like, are there examples of this type of mate selection process in scripture? Yeah, I think so. So the two that come to mind as I've been sort of reading about this are, one is Eliezer of Damascus. Eliezer of Damascus is the servant, the steward, I guess you could say, of Abraham and Sarah. And he is an incredibly, incredibly trusted person as Abraham describes him, because before, when Abraham is supplicating the Lord for answers about the promise of his descendants before he has Isaac, before he has children,
Yeah.
he tells God, you've given me this promise, but I'm childless, and Eliezer of Damascus is my heir.
Yeah.
So this person is a servant in his household, but he's next in line for all of his inheritance before Isaac is born. And so he's a very trusted servant. And this is the person that Abraham sends to his homeland to find a wife for his son Isaac. And the story of Isaac and Rebecca is really beautiful for a lot of reasons. But I love the character of Eliezer because, one, he makes that journey in complete selflessness, like knowing that he was the heir and then Isaac was born.
Yeah.
There's no malice as he goes to look for he does takes on an arduous challenge. Like, traveling these days isn't easy. So he takes on this difficult journey on behalf of the son who supplanted his inheritance. And the entire time he's praying and asking for God to guide him to the right person. And he lays out sort of criteria before the Lord. And the criteria we know in scripture are a little bit specific to the time. Like, Lord, I pray that she draws water for me and also for my camels, is sort of, what he puts out, right?
Yeah.
But what that means, like that, we're like, okay, well, we're not out here drawing water for camels. What that means is that he said, Lord, give me someone who's hardworking, because drawing water at the time was hard.
Yeah.
And drawing water to water a bunch of camels is a lot of water.
It's a lot of water.
That's her carrying big jugs of water up and down a bunch of steps inside an old-timey well. Like, this isn't just an easy, one bucket and she's done. So what he was saying is, God, give me someone who is generous and hardworking and who goes above and beyond and who's hospitable
and selfless.
Because all he said was, would you draw me some water? And she said, yes, my Lord, and I'll draw for your camels too. And that was what told him, like, this is the right one. So anyway, Eliezer Damascus.
Ladies, take notes.
Yeah.
Draw water for your men's camel.
No. Oh my gosh, we're going to get so, canceled for being super misogynistic. No, but it's a cool story that demonstrates that in that case, Abraham and Isaac weren't at all involved in this selection process.
Yeah.
He just went to her and said, hey, I think you'd be good for my master's son. Will you come back with me? And she's like, yeah, let's go. So that's one example of matchmaking that shows up in scripture, which I just think is just really cool. We'll have to talk more.
What's the other one?
The other one is, everyone kind of goes to this one, but the story of Ruth and Boaz.
Oh, yeah.
And Naomi, who admittedly is a little bit more involved in this process.
Invested.
She was invested because whoever, she and Naomi are basically living on the verge of poverty as widows in a society that doesn't really help widows as much. It's hard to make a living without a male protector at this time. And so when Ruth starts to interact with Boaz, Naomi's like, ding, 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 ding. But I think she does it out of wanting to see Ruth do well.
Yeah.
She laments that Ruth is childless and that Ruth lost her husband, who was her own son. And she grieves for her in a really beautiful way. And then she instructs her in exactly what she needs to do to make herself visible as a potential partner for Boaz, and gives her an understanding of, what needs to happen in that society, because Ruth is an outsider and she doesn't understand all the different criteria that have to be met. And Naomi teaches her and talks her through it and is an advocate for her from the sidelines.
Yeah. Which is a beautiful story.
It's a beautiful story. And we have to remember that, the children of Ruth and Boaz are Jesse, the father of David, and King David. And eventually that's the line that we trace Jesus's genealogy through to Joseph, the husband of Mary. So it's really cool that we even see that sort of intermediary process happening. If apostolics love genealogy, right?
Oh, sure.
So it's cool to see that it happens even in sort of the line of Jesus, if you want to go that far.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's the line.
That's the thread.
Right. That's the next Instagram post. Like, do you want to get married like people did in the line of Jesus?
Yeah, all two.
Yeah. Anyway. So I think there is precedent in scripture, and we'll have someone who knows way more about scripture and theology than we do come talk about, whether or not using a matchmaker is the will of God, or if it somehow helps you step outside of it or something.
Sure. Well, let's get to the less spiritual things and talk about is this process worth your money?
Yeah, that's kind of I think an unasked, frequently asked question.
Oh, it's not just unasked, it is asked.
Yeah, but not so much by the people who talk to me in consultations.
Oh, sure,
I was really proud of whoever said in our Instagram stories, is this going to be worth it to me?
Yeah. Fair
question. What do you think? You're the money one.
Oh, I think about efficiency, and I've mentioned this in other earlier podcasts, that if you take all the time and dates and travel and energy into account that it would take for you to get to know one person, to the level in which you understand who that person represents.
Yeah,
Like
that
what
you're
they
confident in who they are.
yeah, like what their values are, and that you would even consider them to have all of the check boxes of red flags even taken away, right? All of the, ideas of their money management, whether they want children,
Mm-hmm.
if they can move or not,
Mm-hmm.
if you like their parents, well, that we can't help you with too much, but
Yeah.
but all of those questions take time for that person to get to know you well enough
Mm-hmm.
for them to trust you with that information.
Yeah, it's a lot of research.
It's a lot of research and time. And so again, I'm going back to time
Mm-hmm.
and money. Money is important, but really the biggest factor is time.
Especially if you have to do the dance of like, like, hey, we just met on a dating site and I don't want to seem crazy and ask you all these questions too quickly.
Yeah. What's your debt to income ratio?
Right.
Like
pickup line for sure. Like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't just go to a singles conference and be like, hello, I find you attractive and I would like to know what your main goals and aspirations are. Like, I mean, you could try that. And maybe it would work.
Maybe there's one man or woman out there that would enjoy that, but
yeah.
But that being said, what's so cool about this though is we have people in all different walks of life that are coming to this and saying, "Hey, I have a unique scenario."
Yeah.
And saying, I'm just going to give a couple examples, but like I have 3 kids from a marriage where my wife or husband has passed away, and I am a solo income household as a result of it, and don't have time to go out looking for a husband or a wife.
Yeah.
And that's just one pretty heavy example, but but you can apply that to any other aspect of life. I have a job that I can't, I really love my career and I can't leave this city. So me going out of the city to find someone and say, "Hey, will you move back over here with me?" That's a tall order, on top of finding someone that you would even want to consider asking that question to.
Yeah, like if you take just normal complex dating and add any additional layer of complexity to it.
Yeah.
Based on your life circumstances. Like
Yeah.
you're in for a world of pain when it comes to just the process of researching and vetting potential dating partners.
Then so now let's get back to the time aspect of it. You've now invested 6 months to a year of your life getting to know this person that you have found to be a wonderful individual.
Yeah.
And something comes up in conversation that says, "Oh, you know what? I really wish you would have told me that 8 months ago, because that is something I do not want to sacrifice in my values." And it might not be something big, but big enough for you to say, "Hey, I don't know if I want to teach my kids that one day," or
I mean, sometimes the really important points don't quote unquote naturally come up in your early dating conversations. Like what you just described of people being 6 or 8 months into a talking relationship and then finding out something that is a really big critical area where they're not compatible. Like, hey, I can't leave where I am, because I have to care for this aging parent, and you can't leave where you are because you have to stay close to your kid's mother and make sure that, those things really happen. And sometimes people don't discover those until they're already in love with someone.
Yeah.
And then it's not just a loss of time. It's also just a loss of your emotional energy. And I mean, that's really hard that you could look so hard for someone, find someone that you think is a good fit, do all the digging, do all the research, give your heart away, and then find out a few months later that it's not going to work because there was some logistical issue that you hadn't thought to ask about beforehand.
Yeah. And so all that being said, you now have to ask yourself, do I want to sacrifice my values or my job or my situation and compromise and go to this person, or potentially lose this time and money investment, which I know it's not about money in that situation. You got to know someone beautiful and wonderful, and that's amazing. But at the end of the day, the goal of it was to marry that person.
Right.
And if you are not marrying that person, then now that time is lost.
Right.
And so what happens is, this is where we come into play.
Mm-hmm.
You tell us as many of your yeses and nos
Right.
that you want for someone.
Big criteria.
Yeah. And obviously it's not set in stone, those things, but there's some subject to change or some flexibility to it. And you say, hey, I really cannot leave this area.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can't, I really don't want to marry a person that has experienced this level of drug addiction because I experienced that drug addiction as well. And that's not, again, that's really deep information you don't just haul off and tell someone about.
Mm-hmm.
You tell us these things. And when you get into a Google Meet with Megan or I, going into this meeting or into this date that this person meets 97% of the criteria that you're looking for.
Let's not throw numbers out there. That's going to vary widely depending on what people are looking for.
I'm exaggerating, but like
they're going to fit the things that are most important to you.
Yes.
Like at a minimum, I'm going to make sure you want the same kind of parenting.
Yes.
You have the same doctrinal beliefs. You can coexist in the same zip code.
Yeah.
Like the two of you can live in the same place.
You at least know that person is open-minded to leaving their location.
Right. And you're not signing up for some crazy, difficult financial challenge. Like both of you aren't making, $15,000 a year doing left-handed puppetry education or something. So like, we're going to make sure that the big questions are answered beforehand.
Yeah. Well, and also a big one is whether or not they want to have children.
Yeah. You're saving a lot of time is the idea.
Yeah.
And energy.
Time and energy and money.
Right.
Because I say money because the point of this section of the podcast is to say, is this worth it?
Yeah. And there are some
financially.
There are some dating sites and matchmaking sites where if you're going to really use them to find someone specific, you're going to have to put up some cash.
Yeah.
So it's not that the other options out there are all free, right?
No.
Even if you're not using dating sites, if you're paying to go to a bunch of different conferences, there's some really fantastic singles conferences that happen every year that are kind of geared in a dating direction, right? Or at least are open to that, really want to increase kind of like mingling opportunities. That's money every year. That's PTO, that's flights and travel and hotel stay. So it's not free to date without a matchmaker.
No.
By any stretch. I think we should talk about what the numbers actually are and how much people would pay to work with us.
Yep. Let's do it.
Okay. So you pay two different things to work with Synchrony. First, you pay a consultation fee, and then you pay a subscription fee. The consultation fee covers the survey that we send you beforehand that we analyze, and it covers the 1 hour virtual consultation that we do where we do a deep dive interview on your values, and it covers effectively the first month of your matchmaking experience where we look for matches.
Well, we go back and forth talking about your bio. We figure out, like, we'll end up sending emails back and forth, like getting clarification on things from our consultation. And so it's not just a 1 hour consultation. It's more of a back and forth dance of trying to figure out how to best figure out your wants and needs.
It's probably covering about 3 hours of dedicated work per person.
Yeah, 3 to 3.5 hours, something like that. Yeah.
When we kind of crunch the numbers. So you pay that fee up front to start. That's sort of the big bulk payment that kicks off your matchmaking experience. After your first month of matching, you start to pay your subscription fee to the Synchrony community, and you get access to it as soon as you start matchmaking. It's just that we discount the first month. They don't have to pay. So what that does is, number one, it gives you access to the Synchrony community, which is that, safe online space for you to hang out with other singles and for you to, also take advantage of the courses and the meetups and the cool resources we're going to pour into that space. We have so many plans for that space that I'm pumped. But already there's people like meeting and interacting in there. I had someone, oh my gosh, I didn't tell you this. I had someone email me that's part of the community and was like, hey, like they expressed interest in somebody else in the community that they had bumped into.
What?
And I'm all about that.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
if someone gets into the community and knows that all the people there are vetted, they've been through the consultation with me, like if you meet someone in there just hanging out and talking and going to meetups, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it gives you access to that community. It also lets us know that you are still actively looking to be matched.
Yep.
So if your subscription is active, we assume that we can match you with someone.
Yeah, which for us is the most important part because we don't want to spend a bunch of time getting someone's hopes up to match them with someone and then find out that they're actually dating someone already or they're not available anymore. So the consultation fee, sorry, the subscription is a way for us to keep track of that.
Right. So those are the two things that you pay for. The prices are to do the initial consultation is $250.
Mm-hmm.
Except for right now, this week only, you can go register and get $100 off that. So
That's right.
$150 only for that. Those, that consultation and those 3-ish hours of work that go into getting you set up and started with matching.
And then there's a subscription, which is $24.99 a month.
Right. So that's, I was getting ready to find something in our budget to compare that to, and what came to my mind is Dunkin' Donuts, but we blow that number out of the water.
Yeah. If we all go to, if we take the whole family to Dunkin' Donuts on a Sunday, it's like $26, $27.
Yeah, like let's just imagine that you were seriously dating just out in society and you were able to go on one date a month.
Yeah.
You would spend way over $24.99. And that's not to say that we're going to be able to promise you a match synchrony conversation every month. But we're going to be actively looking for you and vetting people and also giving you access to all the other ways you can interact with singles while you're there. So all total, you're paying $250 to get started, $24.99 a month to stay active. So I think every individual person is going to have to decide if that's worth it to them.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to be really clear about is that we don't make any kind of guarantees about how many people we're going to be able to match you with, right? Like we don't say, yeah, pay $24.99 a month and you'll get a date once a month, because I can't promise you that someone that's a good fit for your values
or your situation,
right, or your preferences is going to show up on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to put you in conversation with people that aren't a good fit for you just in order to make you feel like you're getting your money's worth.
Yeah.
Like that's not worth anybody's time. Right.
But I will caveat this. If someone doesn't match your preferences, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Like exactly.
Oh, I still bring it up.
Megan will say, hey, this is a pretty close match.
Yeah.
And so she'll shoot you an email and say, hey, this person fits in a lot of these areas, but there's this area that you mentioned that you said you really, would rather not have. Is that is that something you'd be willing to reconsider and give you the chance and the option to say yes or no?
Right. Distance is a great example of that, right? Like a lot of people will say, oh, I'd like someone that's within driving distance of my location. And if I find someone that's long distance, I'll come and ask beforehand.
Yeah.
But that, so we check on those things and we'll give you matches with people that are kind of close. But all that to say, you're getting that kind of being able to kind of offload that search and research process to us. And then there's other values as well, I think, that we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about. And maybe we should dig into some of these later too. But there's a lot of safety in the process. I've heard reports of people talking about their experiences dating on Facebook groups where I had one person who talked about being scammed out of a lot of money by someone who cultivated a relationship with her in an apostolic Facebook group, not just a singles group, an apostolic Facebook group, and who was not who they said they were.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I don't run background checks on people, but I've at least met with them.
Yeah.
And I've asked them a lot of questions and I've talked through a lot of their experiences and can make a pretty good assessment if they're honest and, give you a sense of security that they are a real person who is, really there. Also, if people are paying to get into this community, they're investing in it.
Yeah.
So not anyone can just wander in.
Yeah, they're not just emotionally investing or physically investing, they're financially investing, which is is a good signifier that that person is probably willing and wanting to think about a serious relationship.
Right. They're not playing around.
Yeah.
So that's good. And then I think finally the other value add here is just that one thing that we hear so much from singles is, and we talked about this in our last podcast, just how alone people can feel. And so I think giving people access to a community of singles that are in the same space where they know it's safe and they know that they're communicating with people that have all gone through this process.
Yeah.
I think that's valuable too. So up to you guys. You can tell us if you think that it's worth the money.
Yeah.
But
And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us or chat to some of the people that are responding to some of our like socials.
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
because the people that are involved, some of them were skeptical to begin with, and they're really enjoying the process.
Yeah. Great. Very grateful to them for sharing their experiences, honestly.
Yeah, and we're extremely grateful, but ask them. Don't just trust us or try to trust our word. Ask people that are going through it.
I just got a sudden mental image of LeVar Burton and Reading Rainbow going, but don't take my word for it.
Oh, yeah.
Dear.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Hashtag 90s kids. But yeah, so that's why we think matchmaking is a good tool and why we think it's worth your investment. Is there anything else we need to say about that?
No, I think just at the end of the day, give it a shot. If you don't like it, unsubscribe.
Yeah, you can unsubscribe at any time, by the way. You're not like locked in. So, yeah, why not, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening, y'all. If you have any questions, where do they email us?
questions@synchronyproject.com. And don't forget, guys, this is really the last call. Your friends need to hear about this on Easter Sunday,
That's
or
right.
they're going to miss out on the chance to work with us for $100 less than they'll pay otherwise. So we would love to meet with them. If they have questions, they can reach out to us as well. But yeah, we're just excited to really roll up our sleeves. I think after April 1st is when we're going to have to really buckle down and just start putting tons of matches together, because I think there's going to be a lot of anticipation and we have a lot of new people.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
Well, thank you guys. We love you.
I love y'all. Hey, babe.
Huh.
I love you too.
Oh, I love you, babe.
I'm glad that we're doing this.
Me too.
Yep.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.